The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, but all eyes were on the tiny boy sitting beside his mother at the defense table. His legs dangled above the floor, barely touching the ground. Judge Harold Simmons adjusted his glasses and looked over, his files confused. Who is this child?" he asked sharply. The boy stood up slowly. "My name is Jesse, Your Honor. I'm 8 years old, and I believe my mother's arrest was illegal." The courtroom burst into murmurs. A child speaking like a lawyer. This had to be a joke, but Judge Simmons raised a hand for silence. Eyes now locked on the boy. "Go on," he said cautiously. "I'm listening." And that's how the entire courtroom was stunned, because no one expected an 8-year-old to argue the law like that. Hit a like button and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you are watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Just 2 weeks before that shocking day in court, Jesse was living a quiet life with his mom. Their apartment wasn't fancy. Just 2 small bedrooms, a second-hand couch, and a tiny kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon rolls, because Vanessa loved baking for her son, even when she came home tired from work. She was a cashier at Green Mart, a busy grocery store, a few blocks away. Every night she'd walk through the door with her name tag still on and a smile on her face. "Guess what?" she'd say, pulling a snack out of her purse. "Your favorite chips were on sale." Jesse would grin, hug her tight, and they'd eat dinner together, just the two of them. He didn't need toys or games. He had his mom. That was enough. But that Thursday night, she didn't come home. At first, Jesse thought maybe her shift had gone late. He checked the clock. 7:30 p.m., still early. By 8:15, he had warmed up leftovers for both of them. Her plate sat untouched. By 9C, he sat on the couch, hugging her blanket and staring at the door. Then came the knock, 3 loud bangs. Jesse ran to open it, his heart jumping, but it wasn't her. 2 police officers stood in the doorway. One tall and serious, the other scribbling something in a notebook. "Are you Jesse?" the taller one asked. Jesse nodded slowly. "Where's my mom?" The officer looked down at him, his voice flat. "Your mother's been arrested. She's being held at the 8th precinct." Jesse's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He just blinked. "Arrested? For what?" he finally asked, his voice trembling. "She's been accused of theft from her workplace." Jesse felt like the floor disappeared beneath him. His legs went weak. His hands began to shake. "She didn't do anything," he whispered. "She'll have her chance to explain," the officer said, already turning away. "Someone from social services will come check on you tonight." And just like that, they were gone. The door closed with a click. The apartment felt colder than ever. Jesse stood there for a long time, staring at the door. Then he slowly walked over to the table, sat down, and looked at the 2 plates. Her food was still warm, but Jesse didn't touch it. The courthouse hallway smelled like coffee and old paper. Jesse sat on a hard bench, swinging his legs slowly. He was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. No one had brought him a change. His backpack lay by his feet, but his eyes weren't on his homework or any books. They were locked on the courtroom door. Through the glass, he could see men and women in suits moving around, talking fast, pointing at papers, whispering to each other. Everyone seemed busy. Everyone except him. His mom was inside that room. A security officer had told him he couldn't enter, but he could wait just outside. So he waited and listened. Every time the heavy wooden door opened, Jesse leaned in, catching pieces of conversations. "She's got no record. This doesn't make sense. There's no hard evidence yet, just a witness statement. Judge Simmons won't like how sloppy this file looks." Jesse didn't know who was talking. He didn't even know what some of the words meant. But he was listening and learning. The way the lawyers spoke, the way they used certain words with power and confidence, fascinated him. They weren't just talking. They were building something like math, but louder, more dangerous. By the time his mom came out in handcuffs, her eyes tired and red, something inside Jesse had already changed. That night, after a short visit at the juvenile care center where he was temporarily placed, Jesse was allowed to return home under the supervision of a kind neighbor, Miss Lena, until social services made a final decision. He barely said a word. He just sat on the living room floor with his backpack in front of him. Once Miss Lena went to bed, Jesse quietly pulled out his mom's old laptop from under the couch. It was dusty. The R key was missing, and the screen flickered a little. But it worked. He opened the browser and typed how to defend someone in court. The results surprised him. So many videos, so many websites, words he had never heard before: objection, hearsay, due process, defense strategy. Jesse clicked on one video, a lawyer explaining how trials work, then another, and another. He opened a clean, spiral notebook and began writing. The lines were shaky at first, his handwriting messy, but his brain was wide awake. Every term, every step, every rule, he wrote it down like it was a secret code. He didn't understand everything that night, but something had awakened in him, something sharp, something strong. Other kids were playing games or watching cartoons. Jesse was watching lawyers argue, judges rule, and innocent people walk free, not because they cried, but because someone knew how to fight for them with the law. Jesse didn't have a law degree. He didn't even have all his baby teeth. But in that moment, he knew exactly what he was going to do. He was going to fight for his mom. Monday morning came, but Jesse wasn't the same kid who had left school the week before. He walked into room 204 at Cleveland Elementary quietly, carrying nothing but his old backpack and a serious face. No smile, no talking. Just focus. Ms. Rachel Williams, his homeroom teacher, watched him from her desk. She had always admired Jesse's bright spirit and curious questions. He used to doodle superheroes in the margins of his math homework and always raised his hand during science class. But today something was different. When she walked past his desk, she noticed his notebook. No sketches, no comic book scribbles. Instead, it was filled with short sentences like, "Miranda rights are part of the Fifth Amendment. A defense attorney can file a motion to dismiss if arrest procedure is wrong. What is circumstantial evidence?" Ms. Williams raised an eyebrow. "What's all this, Jesse?" He looked up at her calmly. "Just stuff I'm learning." She nodded slowly. "Anything you want to talk about?" He hesitated, then closed the notebook gently. "I need to learn the law, Ms. Williams. My mom got arrested and she didn't do anything wrong." Her face softened. "Oh, Jesse, I'm so sorry." He nodded, but there were no tears, just determination. Ms. Williams knelt beside his desk. "Sweetie, I know this is really hard, but the legal system, it's not something you can figure out overnight. It takes years of school. You're only 8. "I don't have years," Jesse said quietly. "Her trial is soon." She looked into his eyes and saw something rare, something even adults struggled to hold on to. Clarity of purpose. "Have you talked to anyone about how you're feeling?" she asked gently. "A counselor, maybe?" "I'm not sad," Jesse said. "I'm just focused. If I don't help her, who will?" Ms. Williams opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. What could she say to a boy who believed it was his job to rescue his mom from the justice system? She walked back to her desk, heart heavy. Later that day, she peeked over his shoulder again during quiet reading time. Gone were the usual fun chapter books. Jesse was reading Your Rights in Court, a dusty old paperback he'd checked out. From the school library, Ms. Williams sighed. This wasn't just a phase, this was a mission, and Jesse had already made up his mind. The meeting was supposed to start at 2 p.m. It was already 2:27 when the door creaked open, and a tall man in a wrinkled grey suit rushed into the small conference room. Sorry, he mumbled, setting his briefcase down with a thud. "Busy day." Jesse sat beside his mother at the metal table. Vanessa looked tired, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes red but focused. The man reached out a hand toward her. "I'm Greg Thompson. I've been assigned as your public defender." Vanessa shook his hand lightly. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. Thompson sat down and flipped open a thin folder. "Let's see here." Vanessa, cashier at Green Mart, accused of taking $78 from Register 3. He skimmed the page quickly, not really looking at either of them. "Honestly, I've seen 100 cases like this. First-time offender, small amount. Of money, no violent record. Judge Simmons might go easy, maybe probation if we're lucky." Jesse's small voice cut through the room. "Did you check the surveillance footage?" Thompson looked up, confused. "Excuse me?" Jesse sat up, straighter in his chair. "There's always a camera, one above every register. If she didn't take anything, the video will prove it." Thompson raised an eyebrow. "And who are you, son?" "I'm her son," Jesse answered. "And I've been doing my own research." Thompson gave a weak chuckle, then turned back to the file. "That's cute, but let's leave the legal work to the grown-ups, all right?" But Jesse didn't back down. "Mr. Thompson," he said politely, "if you don't ask for the footage now, it might get deleted." "Stores don't keep video forever." Thompson stopped. He looked at the boy again, really looked this time. The kid wasn't joking. He was serious, sharp, focused, like he belonged in a courtroom. He closed the file slowly. "You've been studying the law?" Jesse nodded. "Since the night they took her." Thompson sat back in his chair. The boy had a point. If there was a video, it could change everything. "All right," he said. "I'll file a motion today, but don't get your hopes up, kid. These things don't always go our way." "I'm not hoping," Jesse replied quietly. "I'm working." For the first time that day, Mr. Thompson didn't have anything clever to say. He just nodded and wrote down, "Request, Green Mart surveillance footage, Register 3. Most kids raced home from school to play basketball or video games. Jesse raced home to study law. Every afternoon, after dropping his backpack on the kitchen chair, he opened his mom's old laptop and got to work. His notebook, now filled with scribbles, printed charts, and sticky notes, was always open beside him. Highlighters were scattered across the table. His pencils were worn down to stubs. He didn't miss cartoons. He didn't miss toys. He missed his mom, and that was enough to keep him going. He spent hours reading library books like Understanding Your Rights and How a Courtroom Works. He wrote emails to lawyers he found online, asking questions like, "Is it legal to arrest someone if the store doesn't have video proof? What happens if a witness lied in their statement?" Most never responded, but one did. A retired law professor named Mr. Lawrence Briggs. Briggs lived just 6 blocks away in a quiet white house with peeling paint and a porch swing. He had gray hair, thick glasses, and a soft spot for justice, even. After retirement, he was curious about the email from Jesse, age 8. At first he thought it was a prank, then he read the message again. It was too specific, too smart, too sincere. So he replied, "Come by tomorrow, 5 p.m., bring your notebook." Jesse showed up right on time, notebook in hand, dressed in his cleanest shirt. Mr. Briggs invited him inside, poured 2 glasses of lemonade, and cleared space at the dining table. That evening became the first of many. Every night after school, Jesse visited Briggs's home. Together, they studied legal codes and real case files. Jesse took notes like a college student. His handwriting improved. His eyes got sharper. "Why do you care so much?" Briggs asked him one day, halfway through a lesson on witness rights. Jesse didn't hesitate. "She's all I have," he said, "and she's innocent." Briggs stared at the boy. He had taught law for 30 years. He had seen kids with big dreams and students who crumbled under pressure. But Jesse, he was different. They reviewed the arrest report line by line. The store claimed Vanessa was caught stealing, but Jesse noticed something. the time of the alleged theft didn't match her time card. Her shift ended 20 minutes before the register shortage was noticed. That's a gap, Jessie pointed out. Someone else could have used the register after her. Briggs raised an eyebrow. Exactly. Right, they moved on to video laws. Most modern stores used cloud-based systems, which meant that even if the footage had been lost, there might still be a digital backup. That's your next angle, Briggs said. They practiced questions Jessie might ask in court about procedure, evidence, even how arrests were supposed to be handled. Briggs smiled at the boy's quick mind. You're better than half the students I taught in law school, he chuckled one evening, closing his legal textbook, but Jessie didn't laugh. He looked up, eyes steady. This isn't for school, he said. This is real. It started with a single sentence buried deep in the police report. No video footage available. Jessie read it 3 times, sitting at Mr. Briggs's dining table, his fingers trembling slightly as he ran a highlighter across the page. There has to be footage, he muttered. Every cashier has a camera over the register. That's store. Policy. My mum told me that herself. Mr. Briggs leaned back in his chair. You're right. But if the store says it's lost, we have to find out what that really means. Sometimes lost is just an excuse. Jessie's eyes narrowed. Then we push back. And they did. Using sample legal forms from Mr. Briggs' old files, they helped Mr. Thompson draft a motion, a legal request, to retrieve cloud-stored surveillance footage from Greenmart's system provider. Jessie even attached a copy of the store's employee manual, which clearly stated, all register activity is recorded and backed up digitally for 30 days. Mr. Thompson, now fully convinced this kid wasn't just smart but right, filed the motion the very next day. 3 days later they got the footage, a flash drive, unmarked, delivered to the defense office. Mr. Thompson, Jessie and Mr. Briggs gathered around the small office monitor as the file loaded. The grainy video flickered onto the screen, register 3, 6:43 p.m. The same day Vanessa was arrested. At first, everything looked normal. Then came the moment. A woman stepped up behind the register. She had the same skin tone as Vanessa, same uniform, same hair pulled up in a high bun. She opened the drawer, looked around, then, quickly, slipped 2 folded bills into her apron. She turned her face just enough. It wasn't Vanessa. The woman was older, heavier. Her name tag was blurred, but it clearly wasn't she. Mr. Thompson leaned closer. Wait, that's not her. That's not your mom. Jessie just nodded. His face was stone still, but his fingers curled into fists of quiet relief. Mr. Briggs was already scribbling notes. Same hairstyle, same uniform. Someone made a mistake, or they didn't bother checking. Mr. Thompson shook his head in disbelief. This changes everything. It's not perfect quality, but it's enough. At the very least, it's reasonable. Doubt. Jessie took a deep breath. Not victory yet, but hope. Real hope. The court date was set for next Thursday. The world would finally hear the truth, and Jessie would be ready. By the time Thursday arrived, word had spread. The boy who studied law to save his mother. The 8-year-old legal mind challenging the court. It started as whispers in the courthouse, hallways. Then, a local reporter picked up the story. By 9 a.m., the courtroom was packed. Reporters, spectators, lawyers with raised eyebrows, and even law students curious to see what the buzz was about. The bailiff opened the door. All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Harold Simmons presiding. Everyone stood. Judge Simmons walked in, robe flowing, jaw tight. He looked out at the crowd, clearly irritated by the unexpected attention. He sat down, banged his gavel once, and spoke firmly. This is not a circus. If anyone thinks this is entertainment, they're in the wrong room. Silence followed. Vanessa sat quietly at the defense table, her hands folded, trying to stay calm. Jessie sat beside her, wearing his best shirt, the tie Mr. Briggs had helped him pick out. His notebook was on the table. Every page had been read, revised, and memorized. Mr. Thompson leaned toward Jesse and whispered, "Are you sure about this?" Jesse nodded. "I'm ready." When Judge Simmons asked if the defense had anything to add before testimony began, Jesse stood. "I'd like to submit a motion, Your Honor." Gasps, murmurs. Cameras clicked quietly from the back rows. Judge Simmons blinked. "You, again. This isn't a game, son." Jesse stepped forward, voice calm. "I know it's not. That's why I'm here." Judge Simmons stared at the boy for a long second. The room held its breath. Finally, he sighed. "Fine, proceed. You've got 2 minutes." Jesse placed his notebook on the podium and flipped to the marked page. "Your Honor," he began, "there are several inconsistencies in the arrest report. First, Vanessa clocked out at 6:23 p.m. The missing money was reported at 6:47. That's a 24-minute gap." He glanced up. No one asked who used the register after her. He flipped to the next page. "Second, there's no chain of custody record for the money. We don't know who counted it, when it was counted, or where it was stored." A few attorneys in the gallery raised their eyebrows. He continued. "Third, Miranda rights were not read during the arrest. That's a violation of procedure. I've included a timestamped transcript based on Officer Brady's body cam footage." Even Judge Simmons leaned forward now. The courtroom had gone silent. Jesse paused, then looked up. "I may not be a lawyer, but I've studied the law. And the law says my mom should never have been arrested without proper evidence." He stepped back. Judge Simmons didn't speak right away. He looked down at the papers Jesse had submitted, realizing they weren't just the work of a child playing pretend. They were organized, properly labeled, with real legal points. The courtroom wasn't laughing anymore, because no one had expected this. For a moment, there was silence. Then someone in the back chuckled. A lawyer near the front whispered under his breath, "This is ridiculous." Another leaned over and smirked. He memorized some phrases from Google. Even a few reporters exchanged eye rolls. To them, it was still a novelty. A kid standing at a podium trying to sound like an attorney. A courtroom oddity. But Jesse didn't flinch. He turned toward the prosecutor, a tall woman in a dark blue suit, flipping through her folder. "Ma'am," Jesse said respectfully, "did your office verify the identity of the suspect before approving the arrest warrant?" She looked up, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" Jesse repeated calmly. "Did anyone check the timestamp on the surveillance report to make sure it matched the moment my mom was at the register?" The room hushed again. The prosecutor blinked, then looked down at her papers. No answer. Jesse continued. "The woman in the video had the same uniform and hairstyle as my mom, but the video shows a heavier build, a different face." He paused and then added, "That's what happens when people rush to judge without checking the facts." Judge Simmons leaned back in his chair, covering his mouth with one hand, his eyes wide. "Where did this kid learn all this?" he muttered to himself. Mr. Thompson stood beside Jesse, shaking his head in awe. Even he hadn't prepared half the points Jesse had just delivered. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Mr. Thompson held up a flash drive. "We'd like to present new video evidence, Your Honor." Judge Simmons nodded slowly. "Let's see it." The courtroom turned toward the monitor as the footage played. A woman standing at Register 3. Same hairstyle, same apron, same general appearance at a glance. But then the camera zoomed in. The side profile, the weight, the name tag, barely visible, read Karen D. The crowd leaned in. It wasn't Vanessa. Judge Simmons looked down at the arrest file, then back at the screen, then at Jesse. It was as if the air had been knocked out of the room. Then the clap, one hand, two, then more. The courtroom, once filled with quiet doubt, stood to its feet and erupted into applause. Reporters clicked photos. Lawyers stood still, stunned. Jesse didn't smile. Not yet. He turned to his mom. Vanessa was crying, Not loud sobs, just tears rolling silently down her cheeks, her hand covering her mouth. Jessie walked over and hugged her. Tight. She whispered through her tears. "You did it, baby. You really did it." The courtroom emptied slowly, but no one stopped talking about what had just happened. Vanessa sat at the defense table, stunned, as Judge Simmons gave his final words. "In light of the new video evidence and inconsistencies, in the arrest procedure," he said firmly, "this court finds no grounds to continue the charges. Case dismissed. Ms. Vanessa, you are free to go." The gavel dropped. It was done. Tears spilled down Vanessa's cheeks as Jessie squeezed her hand. She had been waiting for weeks to hear those words, and they had come, not from a lawyer in a suit, but from her 8-year-old son. Her freedom was his victory. Outside the courthouse, a wall of cameras, microphones, and flashing lights greeted them. "Jessie!" "Over here." "Jessie, how did you learn to speak like that? Who taught you law? Do you want to be a lawyer when you grow up?" The questions flew from every direction, but Jessie didn't act like a celebrity. He wasn't there for fame. He stepped closer to the microphones, holding his mum's hand. "I just read the rules," he said with a quiet shrug. "I followed the truth. Simple, honest, true." That answer went viral the next morning. News channels across the country ran the headline, "8-year-old boy defends his mom in court and wins." But to Jessie, it didn't feel like a headline. It felt like justice. One reporter asked him, "What will you do next, Jessie?" He glanced up at his mom, who was still wiping her tears and smiling at him. "I don't know," he replied, "but I think I want to help more people like her." And in that moment, Jessie wasn't just a boy who loved the law. He was someone who had made the law listen. The sun was just beginning to set when there was a soft knock at the door of their small apartment. Vanessa looked through the peephole and gasped. "Jessie," she whispered, "it's Judge Simmons." Jessie stood up quickly, his heart skipping a beat, not in fear, just surprise. When Vanessa opened the door, the man who had once sat high above them in court now stood in jeans and a sweater, holding a paper bag with warm cinnamon rolls. "Thought I'd stop by," Judge Simmons said with a small smile. "And I heard someone here like cinnamon. They invited him in." Gone was the strict voice and stern look. "Today," he spoke gently, "I've been a judge for over 20 years, he said, sitting at their tiny kitchen table. "And yesterday I watched an 8-year-old remind everyone what justice really means." Jessie stayed quiet, unsure what to say. The judge leaned forward. "I came to apologize," he said. "When you walked into that courtroom, I thought you were just a curious kid playing dress-up. I was wrong. You changed how I see things." Jessie finally spoke. "I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted the truth." Judge Simmons nodded slowly. "And that's what makes you special." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a white envelope. "I called some friends at a legal education foundation. I'm recommending you for a scholarship mentorship program for gifted students with dreams in law. They don't usually take applicants under 14, but for you, I think they'll make an exception." Jessie's eyes widened. Vanessa's hands flew to her mouth. "You mean he could really learn law?" she asked. "Not just learn it," the judge replied. "He could live it, if he wants." Jessie looked up, his voice steady. "I do." And for the first time since the day she was arrested, Vanessa smiled with peace, not the forced kind, but real, full, and proud. The large auditorium buzzed with energy. College students, professors, even local reporters filled the rows of seats at Atlanta School of Law. But the spotlight wasn't on a professor, it was on a child. Jessie stood behind a podium, a microphone adjusted to his height, a navy blue blazer a little too big for his shoulders, but he wore it like he was born for it. He took a deep breath, looked out at the room full of adults, and spoke clearly. "My name is Jessie," he began. "I'm 8 years old, and I believe justice isn't about age, it's about truth." The audience was silent for a heartbeat. Then thunderous applause. People stood to their feet. Some had tears in their eyes. Others just smiled in awe. Behind the stage, Vanessa watched with her hand on her heart. Judge Simmons stood next to her, proud as ever. Months had passed since that courtroom moment. Jesse had joined the mentorship, a program the judge recommended. Every Saturday, he sat in real classes beside high schoolers and college students. He asked questions no one else thought to ask. He even started a small blog called Kid for Justice, where he explained law in simple words for other kids who wanted to understand their rights. But this moment, standing on stage, was different. This was his voice being heard by people who once thought he was too small to matter. As the applause quieted, Jesse gave one last line. "I don't want to be famous. I want to be helpful." Because one voice, even a small one, can make a big difference if it tells the truth. The room stood again, this time not just for applause, but for respect. Jesse had once been a boy fighting for his mother. Now he was a voice for justice, and this was only the beginning. Years later, the courthouse where it all began added a new portrait to its gallery wall. Right next to the seasoned judges and lawyers hung the image of a smiling 8-year-old boy holding a legal notebook. The plaque read, "Jesse reminded us all what justice really means. He was just a child when he stepped into that courtroom, but his courage, intelligence, and belief in truth sparked change far beyond his mother's case." And across the country, young kids who once thought law and justice weren't for them now saw things differently because of Jesse. The boy who listened, the boy who studied, the boy who stood up for what was right and never backed down. If this story touched your heart, hit the like button and subscribe for more inspiring courtroom stories. Like this, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Jesse's place?